digital publication and the OSCI Toolkit Google Hangout. We really appreciate MCN for hosting this and promoting it to their special interest groups and to the constituency at large. If you have any questions or comments, please tweet to #MCNPro, and we will respond to as many questions as we can after our presentation. So we do not have a live camera, so these are the images from the NCM website. My name is Stuart. I'm the Director of Technology at Indianapolis Museum of Art, and with me are Illya Moskvin, the Senior Software Developer, and Ann Young, the Manager of Rights and Reproductions. Three of us will be presenting today, and afterwards, as I said, please again tweet any questions to #MCNPro. So let me briefly introduce the IMA Lab. We have been a component of the Indianapolis Museum of Art since 2010, and we basically were formed as a group, a technology group, to create technologies that will not only advance our own institution, but other museums and cultural institutions across the country. So the technology that we have created over those years has really been intended to facilitate a lot of cultural institutions and really raise the bar in how we're using technology across the board. And a lot of recent grants have really been focused on collaborative efforts. So technology that's created is not just a one-off technology used for one institution, which is great, but as we know, we all have similar struggles and needs and are doing similar things. So we've created a lot of software, most of which has been open source, so it can be used as is or replicated and tweaked a little bit for the own institution. So we have created OSCI, which obviously we'll get into in a moment, a tour application to be used in some of the exhibit halls, which allows you to click and drive down into some of the more details and images about each of the collections. And of course, since we did that so many years ago, there are really vendors out there doing that. We created Art Babel, a collaborative video website for cultural institutions. In 2012, we created Art NC for North Carolina Museum of Art. We redesigned Art Babel in 2013 and our own website, as well as creating an app for an Ai Weiwei exhibit that we had here. In 2014, we created for the Art Institute of Chicago their Launchpad app and Corning Museum of Glass website. And then for an exhibit we had here, we really expanded our TourML application for our Dream Cars exhibit, and then created an interactive device to make your own mark, like a Gustav Baumann woodblock artist did for an exhibit we had. So again, it's me, Illya, Jill Dodge and Daniel Keller are the members of the IMA Lab currently. We are looking to hire 2 developers in the very short term and probably a few more in the longer term. You can see the alumni. These are a few names you probably know from the past and from conferences about museums. I'm sure you've heard of Rob Stein of American Alliance of Museums and Kyle Jabher, who used to run the IMA Lab. So in the future, we're hiring 2 developers short term. So I love this image. This is Anne Helmreich of Getty, and this really is one of the first images that they had online when they started thinking about the online scholarly catalog initiative. So obviously that's what OSCI stands for. And I'm going to go through a brief timeline. One of the most important things I want everybody to realize how pioneering Getty was in their insight into what this could and should be, and how dedicated they've been to this for the past decade. I really kudos to Getty, because I think this wouldn't exist without them. So around 1997, electronic catalogs really referred to something in e-commerce. Go and order something online. And even then, that was in the very beginning, because organizations were really just scrambling to integrate websites into their strategies. IT in general, let alone web, ancillary operations, and certainly not yet even in their marketing mixes. Every organization on the planet now pretty much integrates those into their strategic plans. And back then, website analytics consisted of how many hits you got on your website. That was as far as it went. Back then, I think it was 96 or 97, the Philadelphia Eagles integrated website technology, and that was the first NFL website to do that. So I'm just trying to give you a feel for what things were like in 1997. So Getty Foundation that year created their electronic cataloging initiative. This is a quote from a report looking back on that time from 2003. And I'll read it because I think it's really important to understand what Getty had in mind. The Getty's Electronic Catalog Initiative was designed to help LA museums and visual arts organizations make information on their collections available online. The 6-year initiative launched in '97 at a time when museums were just beginning to develop websites. So we're going to provide this PowerPoint slide presentation to you after this. So I'm not going to go through all these quotes, but I want you to have them in the presentation after. So again, what were the opportunities that Getty saw at that time? They really wanted to increase access to museum collections, which were for the most part not accessible at all. And of course, one of the big efforts in that was digitizing everything. It was going to expand audiences and support teaching and learning, which is a key point that I'll come back to in a moment. Some of the challenges, getting institutional buy-in to do anything online that might create their, make their collections public was a real challenge. Digitization was a brand new thing, and that process has been and continues to be quite a challenge. So then moving from there, in 2008, it was already very popular in Europe, and it started gaining popularity here in the US. And these are rough dates. These are not exact dates. But around that time, open source, open data, these are things that city and federal governments started doing with their data, and museums certainly were jumping on the bandwagon, and Creative Commons, founded in 2001, really started to gain in popularity and thinking about how it can be used. So Getty took their electronic catalog initiative and smartly added the words online and scholarly, because what they really wanted to do was make sure it wasn't just electronic, but that it was accessible online. And the scholarly part of it, which really came into play, was the fact that many of these publications were used for research and needed to be annotated and dealt with like any other physical hard copy resource. So they created a consortium, and the goals are to create models for online catalogs that will dramatically increase access to museum collections, make available new interdisciplinary, up-to-date research, and revolutionize how this research is conducted, presented, and utilized. There is so much if you would dig into that statement, but in general, that was their insight and vision. This slide will be available online. And at this point, in 2012, this is looking at their opportunities and challenges like it was in 2003. This is, 2008. This is very similar, but it's getting more and more sophisticated and diverse. You've now got, all kinds of new technologies that can be part of something that's online. So we'll just leave it there for you to look at after. So the Art Institute of Chicago, and I think I'm missing a slide, there was a consortium created to take this a step forward and create a solution to online scholarly cataloging. And the Art Institute of Chicago was one of those partners, and this is a list of what they were looking to do for the new version of an online toolkit. So the content must speak to a scholarly audience, which differentiated it from their past goals, easy access to high-resolution color image, the ability to footnote personalized copies. So if I went in and annotated something and somebody else went in and annotated it, we would both have access to our own versions of it and our own notes. So, and as well, a persistent uniform resource locator was really important, so you can always go back and find it, and the versioning of that was extremely important, so when you go back and refer to it, the version that you saw at the time you referenced it was still available. So, Since we've been partnering with Getty as well as the Art Institute of Chicago, one of the solutions that we came up with was the OSCI Toolkit. There were several versions, but this one has lasted for a while. It's been used to create quite a few things, which Illya will refer to. So again, quickly, it was created by the IMA Lab. After a successful prototype with AIC proved that what we were doing was on the right path. We worked with the consortium and AIC to do this. It was open source, as most things that the IMA Lab does are, and it was both an authoring tool and a presentation tool. There was an online tutorial with it because it was so important that people could do this themselves, many institutions not having a tech lab, certainly, or even tech staff. And we built in themes so you could modify the look and feel for your own institution. We presented a workshop on this in June here at the Indianapolis Museum of Art. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ann Young, who's going to talk about how she used the OSCI Toolkit.
All right, thank you so much, Stuart, and to MCN both for the opportunity to talk about the creation of Rights and Reproductions, the Handbook for Cultural Institutions in the OSCI Toolkit. But before I get too far into discussing how the toolkit was used for the handbook, I must note that none of this publication would have been possible without the generous support of IMLS and the Getty Foundation. Through their support, the Indianapolis Museum of Art and the American Alliance of Museums were able to co-publish the handbook in September of 2015. Furthermore, without the numerous individuals listed here who provided incredible content, insight, and content reviews, the handbook would not have come to fruition. Now, back to the toolkit and why it was selected for the handbook. Perhaps more importantly, though, why a digital platform was selected for this publication overall. It was quickly realized that a digital publication made the most sense, as it offered many advantages, including allowing the handbook to be a living document that can be updated periodically with relative ease, can include many, many more template examples, as well as links to primary source materials. More than this, though, we specifically chose the OSCI Toolkit to push the bounds of what it had previously done. Now, to be clear, the handbook publication, while it utilized the OSCI Toolkit as a digital platform, is not an OSCI publication, as you might see referenced with something from the Art Institute of Chicago. Rather, we used the toolkit to see what was possible and to develop the first reference publication on this platform. In using the toolkit for the handbook, we essentially created two publications: an online preview, which came out in November of 2014, as well as the full publication that was released last year in EPUB, MOBI, and PDF formats, all of which were exported from the OSCI Toolkit. Now, I am the first to admit that I am far from being the tech-savvy one on today's panel. And even with that caveat, I am truthfully stating that using the OSCI Toolkit is quite simple. At its most basic, it's about building the constituent parts, adding your content, and linking everything together into a single publication. To begin, you create the publication shell, which will have each constituent part or section linked within it. It's very simple to drag and drop the sections to create the publication order desired without causing havoc to the other section's organization or the overall formatting of the publication. Next is adding your content, which is as simple as copy and paste. For the handbook, this meant taking the final edited Word documents, copying the text, and pasting it into the body section. There was little manual entry required for the administrative title, which enabled the back-end linking between the sections of the publication, the title, which was viewable to the end users, and the subtitle field, which for the handbook we used to enter the authors for each chapter. Now, my favorite part of copying and pasting the content from Word into the toolkit was the automatic formatting of the footnotes. Nerd alert, sorry. As you may suspect, being a legal-based reference publication, the handbook is a little heavy on its footnotes, almost 800 as a matter of fact. As the text was copied from Word, the toolkit retained the placement of the footnotes and automatically formatted them. Now, the footnotes and their automatic formatting was an area where we discovered the limits of the OSCI Toolkit, as each section at that point had been formatted to support, if I recall, approximately 150 footnotes. And in the handbook, we have some sections that are upwards of 200 footnotes. So to this, we had to do some changes to the coding of the toolkit, which would allow it to no longer time out when trying to auto-format those footnotes being pulled from the copy from Word. Further to adding content were the figures. Their captions and figure references within the text was slightly more manual than the footnote formatting, but even that was a simple process overall. Imported the image file, linked it to the section, copied the caption from Word, and placed the figure reference syntax within the main text of the section. Just a few more steps. Now, one of the benefits of creating these two publications was the ability to use the online preview as a test run for the overall design, font selection, color scheme, and formatting of the handbook. As you'll see in the following examples, we could really play with these in the preview and then translate them to the final publication. So here you see the formatting of the title page on the online preview versus the formatting of the title page in the final publication. Overall, a very similar look to the font and credit block with a few changes to the image used and the overall text layout. Similarly, the preview allowed us to play around with using block quote formatting for case studies, which readily transferred to the final publication and was used within the case studies, including the formatting of figures that could be placed within the block quotes as well. In addition, the block quote formatting was used for mini quizzes that were placed strategically throughout the text as well, just making sure you're paying attention. And as mentioned previously, a main reason for selecting a digital platform was the ability to include numerous templates, which in the case of the handbook resulted in over 100 pages, which would not have been practical in a print publication. As a digital publication, the handbook is able to directly link to primary sources rather than leaving the end user to later type these resources in and then view them. They can immediately link to them from the final handbook publication. And finally, a reiteration that through the flexibility of the OSCI Toolkit, the handbook was able to be published in 3 formats, all published from the toolkit: EPUB, MOBI, and PDF. In this way, the handbook is able to reach the widest possible audience and is not limited to any specific platform. Further, the PDF is already formatted for a print on demand for those who really do want a hard copy. All 3 versions are available for purchase through AAM's bookstore and for under $5. With that, I say thank you and turn it over to Illya.
Thank you very much, Anne. So I would like to talk about some of the other projects that were done as part of the OSCI initiative and show you guys a demo of the OSCI Toolkit. So here we have maybe not a comprehensive, but a fairly complete timeline of the projects that were done in conjunction with the initiative. There are other digital publications out there, but these are the ones that, that were done with the initiative. And I believe you can find most of this list on the Getty Institution's website for OSCI. The projects highlighted in green were the ones that used the OSCI Toolkit specifically. It's interesting to see the different approaches taken by these various partners. Briefly, the toolkit was created in partnership with the AIC for their Monet and Renoir catalogs. And since then, it's been used by the LA County Museum of Art for the Southeast Asian catalog and for the Freer Sackler for their Japanese illustrated book, the Pulver collection. So I'm going to go through these examples, and as I do, I kind of want you guys to think about a couple questions. What is the difference or the differences between online catalogs, online collections, and online exhibits? Are there any differences? And if so, where do the lines lie, and how are these lines blended by these various projects? So moving on to the Art Institute of Chicago, they started with the Monet and Renoir catalogs, but this has been an ongoing project. They have created 7 catalogs this far, and I think they really pushed the envelope on what can be done with the toolkit and the kind of interactive content that can be added to it to illustrate various points. They have dedicated technical staff that work on these projects, that maintain their catalogs, that create new interactives, and they occasionally push this kind of content back to us, and we incorporate it into the base toolkit. So the AAC followed the quintessential book model for their catalogs. They are largely linear. They have the table of contents becomes the primary navigation mode of navigation through the catalogs, and the web app that delivers the catalog really emphasizes the layout and the interactive content, and it follows largely the so to speak skeuomorphic catalog, like book catalog model, where you have columns and illustrations and everything is mixed together, and they really, I think, pushed the envelope with interactive modules in particular. So here we have the basic sort of zoomable image that we included with the toolkit, and they've built on that to create layered images and detailed views of like matching conservation imagery to the original image, like to the photography of the original painting and whatnot, and all sorts of interactives like that. And they also include the basic sort of user interaction components that come with the OSCI Toolkit, like citation tools, footnotes, and note-taking abilities. So we can kind of contrast the model that the AAC took with that undertaken by the Freer-Sackler with their Pulvera collection. So we helped out with this one, and it does incorporate the OSCI Toolkit, but the actual end result is quite different. The presentation is different, although the underlying data is largely the same. The emphasis is much more on illustrated essays. They are featured prominently in the navigation. You have the standard sort of quote-unquote 5-page website hierarchy. And although the essays were a major part of the AIC, here they're presented in a less linear format and a more browsable format. And the essays include the same tools that are expected of the OSCI Toolkit, with the user functionality, in the bottom right. So you have annotations and so on. But more than that, you see something that I think is de-emphasized in the AIC catalog. You see more of an approach like that taken up by online collections, where you have the ability to browse individual objects in a list format, to search through objects, to filter them, and you can drill down into object details, and the pages are very reminiscent of how online collections are. Moving even further in that direction, we have the Chinese painting calligraphy from the Seattle Art Museum. This one was not created using the OSCI Toolkit, but I think it illustrates the direction in which, not necessarily things are going, but in which these online publications can be taken. So this is essentially an online collection that is specialized to the needs of these objects. So you really have to drill down to the essays, through the object detail pages. The object detail pages are enhanced with tools that are needed for calligraphic collections, such as identifications of inscriptions and seals. And then once you click through, then you get to the essays. This approach is pretty great from a, seeing a whole collection at once standpoint, but it also kind of de-emphasizes the essays. It tends to be that this encourages essays to be related to a single object instead of a theme in the entire collection. And also the Rauschenberg catalog, I would say, takes that even further, where they have their entire digital publication project incorporated into their online collection. But we're not going to cover it right now. So with this in mind, when you're developing tools or when you're developing your catalog, there's some certain considerations you need to make. And These considerations are not, black and white, either or. It's a balance that needs to be struck, and it's a balance that needs to be struck not only in the sort of text and imagery in the content, but also in the visual design and the information hierarchy of a website. So you have to consider how linear or narrative you want to be versus how browsable and searchable you want your catalog to be. Do you want it to be more object-focused or theme-focused? And there are a lot of possibilities to be taken in either direction. Like you can incorporate your catalogs into online collection. You can have a more linear model. And how do you balance that? So our suggestions, just from seeing many of these projects and participating in more than a few, is, well, you got to consider it. You have to really do your research, see what worked for other institutions, ask them. We can get you in touch with some of our partners. There's been a lot of wonderful research published in conjunction with the OSCI initiative. Read up on it, see what the feedback has been, what the analytics say, and yeah, just collaborate with other institutions, find out what works, and consider what you want your project to be. And with that, I'm going to briefly demonstrate the OSCI Toolkit. Anne has already touched on some of the points, so I won't make this too long. Let me go ahead and go over here. So we have a website at oscitoolkit.org where you can kind of read up on the history and some of the features of the toolkit, as well as some of the architectural and tutorial decisions. Architectural decisions and tutorials for developers and content editors. Our whole source code is available on our GitHub, github.com/IMA Museum. And you just have to search for the OSCI Toolkit, and you'll see several repositories. And now I'm aiming this towards my fellow developers. The OSCI Toolkit is, in fair part, meant to be a framework for additional content to be built on top of it, especially insofar as interactive modules are concerned. So for instance, if you have a IIIF server or an IIP server set up, you can incorporate it into the toolkit, but you're going to have to do some development in order to get it going. So we have the installer, which is meant to help automate that process, give you a taste of the toolkit. It does require Linux, but otherwise you should be able to get up and running in no time. You have the front end, which contains a lot of our recent work, which concerns developing new themes and whatnot. And then you have the back end, which is Drupal driven and contains a lot of our custom modules to make it all tick. This is, I guess while I'm here, I might as well reference. So the toolkit includes an ability to modify the look and feel of your generated EPUBs using style sheets. I would say if you can go with the device defaults, that's generally preferable, but we do provide that option. And here's an example that was used for the handbook. All right, so moving on to the demo. This is kind of what you see when you start up an instance of the OSCI Toolkit. It's a fairly standard Drupal workflow, and Drupal is fairly, as far as I'm aware, it's quite prevalent in the museum sphere, so this shouldn't feel too foreign for many of you. We have the content listings here. There are, let me go ahead and show you. There are several primary types of content. We have the publication, which serves as the root of your project. Underneath the publication will be nested sections, and sections are essentially chapters. They're named sections because they can take other responsibilities, but they're text with inserted interactive content. And that can include everything from image assets to things like 3D object views. I believe that is something that the Art Institute is currently working on, but don't quote me on that. You have also notes, which are automatically generated from the web app when users annotate your documents. And you have the additional interactive content that can be experimented with and used as examples to build your own. So we have, with the installer, we have a sample publication bundled called Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And you can kind of see how a basic OSCI Toolkit publication would be structured. So you have sections, and these are automatically generated when you associate a section with the publication. And then you, under the editor mode, yes. Under the editor mode, you have some metadata that you can insert, which gets translated into the EPUB and other publishing options. And you have an ability to add a glossary to your publication through here, which is available via the web app and which can be included with the generated EPUB. From the publication section, you also have some helpful links for generating the EPUB. A lot of the EPUB generation is supposed to be done through scripts, but for the bare essentials, this should suffice. As I've mentioned, a lot of our recent work had to do with creating themes and the ability to select themes and sort of creating a framework for other developers to insert their institution's branding in a relatively easy manner. And I'll go ahead and demonstrate this. I just want to go ahead and show you guys first how sections and such look. So yes, here is a sample section. If you click on the view, it's just a quick preview. This isn't how the web app looks, but it's to give you a point of reference if you're scrolling through your admin interface. And you have the text with inserted figures. And this one doesn't have any footnotes, but the interface for both is largely the same. So you insert figures using asset references, and this gives you a way to add figures back into the text. We also added functionality to paste from Word. Word likes to include a lot of extraneous markup, and the OSCI Toolkit helps filter that out. So moving from that, we have the publication views. You have the ability to select themes. Multi-column was the original one we created. That is very book-like. And we experimented with more mobile-friendly themes, more of a spread-like theme instead of a newspaper one, and a few that just have the bare essentials and the bare connections needed to add your own branding on top of that. So let's see. I've been zoomed in so you can see my screen easier, but I'll go ahead and reset it now. So here's how the default OSCI Toolkit theme looks like. It has a lot of the sort of typical features, including zoomable images, figure references, table of contents, user notes, an ability to search, and an ability to log in and out of the web app view. And we have others as well, including just a variant on the multi-column theme with much of the same features, and an ability to link to various parts of the publication and add your own notes. Yeah, pretty straightforward. The interesting ones, I think, are the ones that strive to be mobile friendly, and this is something that I think deserves more, some more consideration. You know, how do you expect your users to be using your publication? Do you expect them to be reading it on desktop only, or iPads as well, mobile phones? Yeah. Apologies, I think we have some construction going on right outside. Yeah, so if you would like to, you can go to the demo.oscitoolkit.org, experiment a bit. We have it locked down right now for this presentation, but we'll unlock it once it is complete. So yeah, thank you. And I'm passing this back on to Stuart.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Illya. So that's a lot to digest. Slides. Can you bring back the slides?
Yes.
That's a lot to digest in 35 minutes in a non-interactive mode, so I appreciate you sticking through the presentation. There's a lot here to go through to learn about the background into what OSCI Toolkit does and can do. I mean, as with any toolkit, it really is up to your imagination and your requirements to use it the way that it best suits your needs. But moving forward, in conclusion, you know, we currently have it released as open source on GitHub, and we're still working with people. We are, you know, as with any technology, the challenge in the world of technology is how rapidly things change and advance, and you know, one wants to incorporate as much new technology as one can. So we do have the constant challenge of looking forward. So we are currently working on something internally called the Clues Collection, which we are looking at the OSCI Toolkit and considering that as well as other options, as well as possibly creating something based on the toolkit but moving forward. One of the things we are looking at is longevity. As these technologies change, we want to make sure that what you have created in a digital format can continue to be used, and not that it's obsolete technology which won't allow you to use and reference your publication. We're going to be conducting a presentation as part of Museum Next conference in New York next month. So if you happen to be at that conference, please feel free to join us. It's going to be at the Skyscraper Museum Wednesday morning. And we're having it there because they do a lot of digital publications, and I thought it would be rather appropriate to have it there. And plus, I think it would be a really interesting venue considering we're in Manhattan. So lessons learned, again, Getty is notorious for looking back on their projects and making sure that they achieved their goals and learning lessons that they can take forward with them. They did present this at the Museums and the Web conference this year. So if you want to reference that, they had a lot of good insight into what they did. And based on that and the workshop here, we have, you know, some of the following questions. Who is using online scholarly catalogs now? How are they being used? What does digital offer that makes online catalogs more useful? How are catalogs perceived by the target audience of scholars, art historians, and curators? Again, the key word there being scholars, I think. And what are the drivers and barriers to success of online scholarly publications? And there are many. There continue to be a lot of challenges that that need to be overcome, and that is something that is on our radar. Is what are the barriers that really need to be addressed in an upcoming version? So, future OSCI, what does it mean? You know, there's going to continue to be new research. There's going to continue to be new multimedia that's got to be incorporated into any kind of a digital publication tool, VR and AR being the ones that are really coming online that need to be incorporated, that haven't been. How do you interact? Conservation documentation across the art museum world as well as the horticultural world. Conservation is a key issue. And on and on. Longevity, analytics, and access to non-displayed collections and integration. So that is a list of things that, you know, we're considering. We strongly believe in online digital scholarly publications. I think it's a contribution that the museum world is putting out there and should continue to do so. But I think there are some issues that we need to step into the future, building into the OSCI world. So this format is a challenge, but if you do have questions, please feel free to tweet them to MCNPro. We'll stay online for a couple of minutes, and if we come up with some questions, we will answer them the best we can. And Illya, any comments while we wait in silence?
Just looking forward to the future of the OSCI Toolkit and maybe Rights Repro Handbook version 2.0.
That would be great. Considering technology and laws change as fast as they do.
I've already got a working list of updates. Next year's project.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't, we will field questions, send them to MCN or send them to us. It'll be available on our slide presentation. We'll be glad to answer the best we can. Moving this forward, we would love to create a project out of this and solicit input. If you've used this or if you've not, or if you're looking for functionality in a new and improved version of the OSCI Toolkit, please feel free to email us with comments and suggestions and questions. And again, thank you very much for attending. I hope you got out a lot of it, as much as we did in giving it. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.